Let's get something straight. Hollywood loves to romanticize war, but the real stories behind those golden statuettes, they're a mix of guts, trauma, madness, and the kind of raw humanity that never gets wrapped in a neat, patriotic bow. Ever wondered which war movies the Academy actually handed their biggest prize to, and why these films still punch us in the gut decades later? Buckle up, because the winner's circle is smaller and way more controversial than you might think. Wings 1927. Let's kick off with the one that started it all, a film so loud, explosive, and ambitious, it actually invented the Hollywood war epic. Wings wasn't just the first Best Picture winner, it was a full-throttle daredevil act filmed when biplanes were basically flying coffins, and most Hollywood producers still thought action meant a pratfall in a silent comedy. Here's the pitch. Two young men, both in love with the same girl, sign up to become World War I fighter pilots. Sounds sappy? Maybe. But when the engines roar and the bullets start flying, Wings ditches romance and delivers dogfights so real, pilots today still break a sweat watching them. Director William A. Wellman was an actual combat pilot in WWI, and he pushed the cast harder than most generals. No blue screens, no digital wizardry. Every mid-air collision and fiery crash was pulled off with real planes, real stunts, and occasionally real blood. Clara Bow, the it girl herself, ended up ducking flying debris just to stay in the frame, and legend has it that half the extras walked away with concussions. Here's the wildest part. Wings cost more than most studios' entire yearly budget, and Paramount thought it would bankrupt them. Instead, it smashed box office records, set the standard for every action film to follow, and proved audiences craved stories that showed war as hell, not just as a backdrop for glory. In the end, Wings soared off with the very first Best Picture Oscar, not bad for a movie that risked it all in the clouds. Think Marvel's VFX is hardcore? Try strapping a camera to a rickety biplane and praying you don't die before lunch. Wings is pure cinematic adrenaline, and nearly a century later, it's still the original king of war on film. All Quiet on the Western Front 1930. If Wings was a roller coaster, All Quiet on the Western Front is the brick wall that stops the ride cold. Forget propaganda, this one doesn't care about flags, victory speeches, or neat endings. Instead, it's the raw, unfiltered nightmare of a German schoolboy shipped off to the trenches, only to learn that war isn't about honor. It's about survival, mud, and watching your friends die for no reason at all. Director Lewis Milestone threw every Hollywood rulebook out the window. The camera crawls through bombed-out craters, lingers on empty helmets, and dares you to look away as young soldiers go from fresh-faced recruits to hollow-eyed ghosts. Based on Erich Maria Remarque's shattering novel, the film was so brutally honest, Nazi Germany banned it almost immediately, and mobs literally attacked cinemas showing it. That's how much it rattled the world. On set, the cast was put through the ringer. Actual veterans served as extras, and the mud, barbed wire, and relentless artillery were as real as the terror on the actors' faces. The dialogue is spare. Sometimes just a look says more than a whole speech. By the final act, you're not cheering. You're just hoping someone makes it out alive. Here's the kicker. All Quiet on the Western Front didn't just win Best Picture, it practically rewrote what a war movie could be. No more sugarcoating, no more John Wayne heroics, just the grim, soul-crushing truth that war eats its children and calls it patriotism. Watch it today, and it's still as gut-punching as any modern war film, maybe even more so. It's the movie that proved Hollywood could do more than entertain. It could shock, mourn, and rage against the madness. In other words, it's required viewing, even if it breaks your heart. Cavalcade in 1993. Here's a film that never gets name-dropped at Oscar parties, but don't be fooled. Cavalcade was the original multi-generational trauma drama, and it snuck a war epic into what looks, at first glance, like just another stately British costume piece. But this isn't tea and crumpets. This is the 20th century's pain parade, with war marching right through the front door. The movie trails two upper-crust London families from New Year's Eve 1899 straight through the Second Boer War, the death throes of Victorian England, and then into the inferno of World War I, changing everything they know about class, love, and survival. Directed by Frank Lloyd and adapted from Noel Coward's hit stage play, Cavalcade spares no expense when it comes to spectacle or heartbreak. You get wide shots of mass mobilizations, thunderous newsreels of war declarations, and scenes that show just how fast glory can turn to grief. One minute there's champagne, next telegrams and black armbands. The film's centerpiece, the horrors of World War I, depicted not through bloody trenches but through the families ripped apart at home and the sons who never return. It was a technical marvel in its day, cramming 2 decades of historical change into a tight 2-hour sprint. There are titanic sinkings, street parades, and those moments of sudden silence when characters realize the world they knew is gone for good. War isn't just backdrop here. It's the engine that drives every heartbreak. The Academy couldn't resist. In the middle of the Great Depression, audiences saw their own uncertainty reflected in Cavalcade's onslaught of bad news and shattered innocence. Critics at the time called it magnificent and overwhelming, while today's viewers might see it as a time capsule of a world hurtling from optimism to catastrophe. Punchline? If you think war only ruins the men in uniform, Cavalcade is the sharp slap of reality you didn't know you needed. It's about the price civilians pay and the way history's bombs explode quietly in your own living room. Not your average best picture, but, in its own way, one of the boldest statements the Oscars ever made. The Best Years of Our Lives, 1946. You want a movie about war? Try one about the battles fought after the shooting stops. The Best Years of Our Lives isn't about foxholes or firefights. It's about what happens when the parade ends, the medals are packed away, and the real struggle begins. Coming home. Director William Wyler, a war veteran himself, turned this into the ultimate homecoming movie, one that isn't afraid to admit that victory has a price. The film tracks 3 veterans, an infantry sergeant, a bombardier officer, and a sailor who lost both hands, as they return to the same small American town, each carrying a suitcase full of ghosts. Their families are different, their jobs are gone, the world moved on without them, and the film dares to ask, now what? The most iconic performance comes from real-life UWA-12 amputee Harold Russell, whose presence is so raw you almost forget you're watching fiction. Wyler didn't sugarcoat anything. PTSD wasn't even a term yet, but you see it all over these men's faces. Their trauma is front and center: nightmares, alcohol, broken relationships, and the aching need to feel normal again. There's no flag-waving or cheap sentiment. Instead, there's a powerful honesty about how war chews people up and dumps them into a world that doesn't know what to do with them. Audiences wept, critics raved, and the Academy handed it a haul of Oscars, including Best Picture. It was a cultural phenomenon, smashing box office records in a country desperate to make sense of peacetime wounds. It still lands, decades later, because it's not just about one war, it's about every soldier, every family, left trying to rebuild from rubble nobody else can see. Final word, The Best Years of Our Lives is the war movie that haunts after the credits roll. It's not about how you survive the battle, it's about how you survive the silence afterward, and what you bring home that no one else can ever understand. From Here to Eternity, 1953. Before From Here to Eternity, Hollywood's idea of World War II was all heroics and stirring speeches. Then came this powder keg, a film that blows up every expectation about the greatest generation and replaces it with sex, scandal, and a brutal look at military life on the eve of Pearl Harbor. It's not just a war movie, it's a bare-knuckle soap opera disguised as a military epic. The story unfolds at Schofield Barracks in Hawaii just before December 7, 1941. We meet Private Prewitt, a boxer who won't fight anymore, Sergeant Warden, who's tangled up in an affair with the captain's wife, and a cast of misfits desperate for meaning in a system that chews up individuality. The famous beach scene with Burt Lancaster and Deborah Kerr is still one of the steamiest moments in movie history, and it's easy to forget that it all leads up to one of America's darkest days. Director Fred Zinnemann and screenwriter Daniel Taradash didn't just push boundaries, they smashed them. This was post-war America. The censors were nervous, the military bristled, and the cast knew they were risking careers. But it paid off. The violence feels real, the romance is forbidden, the camaraderie is complicated. And when the bombs finally fall on Pearl Harbor, every character is forever changed. No easy heroics, just chaos and loss. From Here to Eternity swept the Oscars, grabbing 8 statues, including Best Picture, and turned its entire cast into legends. Frank Sinatra, whose career was on life support, won Best Supporting Actor and resurrected his stardom in one unforgettable performance. The film's bold mix of sex, violence, and heartbreak helped drag Hollywood kicking and screaming into the modern age. Bottom line, if you're looking for the glossy, sanitized version of Wah Stew, look elsewhere. This is War with the gloves off, a reminder that sometimes the greatest battles are fought off the battlefield, in the mess halls, bedrooms, and broken hearts of the people just trying to get by. The Bridge on the River Kwai, 1957. Think war movies can't be a psychological chess match? The Bridge on the River Kwai will smack that idea right out of your head. Forget massive battle scenes. This film is a slow-burning nerve-wrecker about pride, madness, and the absurdity of following orders, set deep in the jungle hell of World War II. The story, British POWs, led by the stubborn-as-a-mule Colonel Nicholson, aka Alec Guinness, in his Oscar-winning prime, are forced by the Japanese to build a railway bridge in Burma. The Japanese want it as a show of power. Nicholson wants it to prove British discipline. Cue the ultimate clash of egos. David Lean's direction is nothing short of legendary. He turns a handful of sweating, half-starved men and a rickety bamboo bridge into a stage for the world's most twisted duel of wills. The scenery is lush, the sun blinding, and the atmosphere so tense you can practically smell the desperation. The soundtrack's whistling Colonel Bogey March is so iconic, it'll probably start playing in your head as soon as you read this. But the Bridge on the River Kwai isn't just a battle of the British and the Japanese. It's a razor-sharp look at how war warps the minds of the men caught in its gears. Nicholson becomes obsessed, not with beating the enemy, but with building the perfect bridge, even if it means helping his captors. The result? A third-act train wreck of conscience, sabotage, and one of the most famous explosions in movie history. When the dust settled at the Oscars, this film hauled in 7 trophies, including Best Picture, and made Alec Guinness a household name. But here's the real legacy. The movie forced audiences to ask if honor and duty can turn into insanity. If you ever needed proof that war isn't just fought with guns, but with egos, pride, and a refusal to back down, this is it. Final punchline. By the end, you're left wondering who really won, and if there's even such a thing as winning in war. Madness, the film cries, and honestly, it's hard to argue. Lawrence of Arabia, 1962. Some war movies drop you in the trenches. Lawrence of Arabia tosses you into the blinding, endless desert and dares you to find your way out. This isn't just a war film. It's an epic of mythic proportions, equal parts adventure, tragedy, and psychological drama, all wrapped around the enigmatic T.E. Lawrence. Forget what you learned in history class. This is World War I on the razor's edge, with camels, sabotage, and shifting loyalties under a sun that never quits. David Lean's direction is flat-out legendary, and the visuals are so vast, you'll want to squint at your own TV. Peter O'Toole, in his career-defining role, plays Lawrence as part genius, part madman, a British officer who rallies Arab tribes against the Ottoman Empire, but slowly loses himself to his own legend. The movie doesn't let you settle in. 1 minute, you're swept up in glorious victory charges. The next, you're watching Lawrence spiral into obsession, haunted by the violence he's unleashed. The production itself became Hollywood lore. The shoot almost killed the cast with heat stroke. The script ballooned past 4 hours, and every shot is so painstakingly beautiful, it's like war poetry. Maurice Jarre's score is pure goosebumps. The film doesn't just show war, it shows how war makes and breaks men who think they can outsmart fate. But Lawrence of Arabia isn't content with hero worship. The closer you look, the more you see Lawrence's transformation from naive idealist to a haunted, fractured icon. It's a film obsessed with the cost of glory and the emptiness that follows conquest. That ambiguity is why critics and audiences are still arguing about Lawrence's true motives. The Academy couldn't look away, handing it 7 Oscars, including Best Picture, and ensuring it would become the go-to example of what a big movie could achieve. Bottom line, if you think war is simple, black and white, or about clear-cut heroes, this sand-blasted epic will burn those illusions away faster than a desert wind. The Deer Hunter, 1978. You want raw? You want real? The Deer Hunter doesn't just show you the Vietnam War, it drags you into its aftermath, its silences, and its scars. This is a movie that starts at a Pennsylvania steel town wedding and ends in a haze of trauma on the other side of the world. Forget the gunfights. This is war as a slow-burn tragedy where the greatest wounds are the ones nobody sees. Michael Cimino's vision is bold and brutal. The film is split in three: blue-collar American life, the unspeakable horror of Vietnam, and the broken homecoming. Robert De Niro leads a powerhouse cast that includes a young, electrifying Christopher Walken and the deeply haunted John Savage. Together, they're friends who hunt deer for sport, but end up being hunted by the horrors of war. The infamous Russian roulette scenes, not historical fact, but cinematic gut punches that left audiences rattled and politicians screaming unpatriotic. What sets The Deer Hunter apart isn't just its violence, it's the way it captures the shattering of ordinary lives. The wedding sequence is almost unbearably joyful, the jungle is a waking nightmare, and the final act back home is all about silence, addiction, and loss. Every performance is raw to the bone. Walken's Oscar-winning turn as Nick, lost in Saigon's underworld, is so devastating you can't look away. This film divided critics, infuriated censors, and traumatized even the toughest Vietnam veterans. But it also scooped up 5 Oscars, including Best Picture, and carved out a permanent spot in the war movie canon. The message is simple and devastating. War doesn't end when the shooting stops, and for some, it never ends at all. Final thought. The Deer Hunter isn't about battlefield heroics. It's about the wounds you bring home and the ones you can never, ever heal. If you want the myth, look elsewhere. If you want the pain, it's all right here. Platoon 1986. Forget the patriotic posters and silver screen John Waynes. Platoon is the cinematic grenade that blew Vietnam War movies wide open. Oliver Stone didn't just direct this film. He exorcised his own demons from his combat days and threw them straight into your lap. No sugarcoating, no glory, just mud, blood, and the twisted, surreal madness of a war where the real enemy isn't always the guy in the jungle. It might be standing right next to you. The story centers on Chris Taylor, a fresh-faced kid who drops out of college to volunteer in Vietnam, dreaming of heroism but quickly swallowed by chaos. Played with simmering intensity by Charlie Sheen, Chris is torn between 2 sergeants, the compassionate, battle-scarred Elias Willem Dafoe, and the ruthless, hard-as-nails Barnes Tom Berenger. Their conflict isn't just personal, it's the raging soul of the platoon, and by extension, the war itself. Stone's camera doesn't flinch. Every firefight is confusion and terror. Every lull is filled with paranoia and desperation. The soundtrack pulses with adagio for strings, giving the violence a tragic edge that's impossible to shake. The film is infamous for its realism. Stone made the cast endure a hellish boot camp shoot in the Philippines, living like grunts, eating rations, and sleeping in the rain. You can practically smell the sweat and fear coming off the screen. When it hit theaters, Platoon stunned audiences. Critics praised its authenticity, veterans wept, and censors winced at the brutality. 4 Oscars later, including Best Picture, the film cemented itself as the Vietnam War movie for a generation that had grown tired of Hollywood's old lies. Bottom line, Platoon is the battle cry of everyone who ever came home changed, shattered, or angry. If you want to know what war really does to people inside and out, strap in and watch Stone's Vietnam Nightmare. The English Patient 1996. If you thought Best Picture-winning war films were all mud and gunfire, think again. The English Patient is a fever dream of war, romance, and regret, painted on a canvas as vast as the Sahara. Some people call it the ultimate weepy. Others see it as an epic of betrayal. But one thing's for sure, this film is proof that love and conflict can be just as deadly as any battle. The plot is a tapestry of memories. A mysterious, badly burned man known only as the English Patient is tended by a Canadian nurse in an Italian monastery at the tail end of World War II. Flashbacks swirl like desert sand, revealing his true identity as Count Laszlo Almasi, played by Ralph Fiennes, a Hungarian explorer who gets swept up in a doomed, passionate affair with Kristen Scott Thomas's Catherine Clifton against the backdrop of Nazi intrigue and the North African campaign. Every revelation is a dagger, love, betrayal, and loss are all tangled up with maps, bombs, and the desperate politics of war. Director Anthony Minghella delivers a lush, immersive immersive vision. Sun-baked dunes, opulent Cairo ballrooms, war-ravaged ruins. The supporting cast, from Juliette Binoche's gentle nurse to Willem Dafoe's vengeful thief, turn every subplot into a mini-tragedy of its own. The cinematography is so gorgeous, you half expect to see sand spilling out of your TV. Some critics grumbled about the film's length or its swirling narrative, but audiences swooned. The English Patient swept the Oscars, taking home 9, including Best Picture, and launched 1,000 parodies. Thank you, Seinfeld. But strip away the melodrama, and you're left with a story about the impossible choices people make when the world is falling apart. Here's the real kicker. This isn't just a wartime romance. It's a reminder that war destroys not only lives, but loves, dreams, and every secret we try to bury in the sand. The Hurt Locker, 2009. If the Hurt Locker doesn't make your palms sweat, check your pulse. You might already be dead. Catherine Bigelow's bomb squad thriller grabs you by the nerves and never lets go. Set in the smoldering chaos of the Iraq War, this is the first Best Picture winner to take us straight into modern warfare's meat grinder, where the enemy is everywhere, and every shadow could be your last. Staff Sergeant William James, Jeremy Renner, in a breakout role, is the guy you call when something needs defusing, literally and metaphorically. He's reckless, brilliant, and addicted to the rush of walking up to a ticking bomb with nothing but a pair of pliers and a steady hand. The film doesn't waste time with politics or backstory. Instead, it's a relentless sequence of nerve-shredding missions, each more harrowing than the last. Bigelow's style is pure adrenaline. Handheld cameras, jump cuts, explosions that shake your bones. You're right there in the dust, feeling every beat of sweat and moment of panic as James and his team inch closer to detonation. The tension is so thick you could slice it with a bayonet. And unlike most war movies, there's no safe zone. Even at home, the war follows these men, crawling into their dreams and refusing to let go. Critics hailed it as a masterpiece, a rare film that understands war as addiction, not just horror. It beat out James Cameron's Avatar for Best Picture, marking the first time a female director ever claimed the top prize. For soldiers, the movie was so authentic, it was almost painful to watch. For everyone else, it was a gut check about what modern combat really looks like. Final punchline: The Hurt Locker is war with the safety off. A reminder that for some, the battlefield is the only place that ever feels like home. If you want Hollywood fantasy, look elsewhere. This is the war movie that stares into the blast zone and doesn't blink. So, what do these 11 Best Picture winners really tell us? War on film isn't just about battles. It's about obsession, heartbreak, madness, and survival in a world gone sideways. Each movie here left a scar and rewrote the rules for everyone who followed. Which one hit you hardest? Drop your thoughts below, argue your favorites, and if you're craving more Hollywood truth bombs, hit like, subscribe, and join the conversation. The next cinematic war zone is just one play away.